What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassity. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares to set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. This is where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Folks, don't forget to follow, subscribe, share, like this thing up. It helps the show. Definitely helps the show. So who are we talking with today? We're talking with Sheena Eastburn. And I got to tell you, when I was doing my show prep, I got into reading about this case, and about an hour and a half later, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe all of that just happened to this lady, Sheena Eastburn, and she's out, and she's, I mean, it's like, I'll take you back a little bit, give you some pieces here, because we're going to fill in the blanks to all this. But at age 17, Sheena was prosecuted as an adult, convicted of murder, and sentenced to life without parole. That's a lot right there. She got married at 15. She got divorced, I think, at 16. The crazy part of this story is that she was kind of seeing her ex. She was also seeing another guy. There had been this crazy burglary thing that she wasn't even aware of, but she said that they needed to take back this rifle, and in the meantime, there was going to be like some drugs and stuff that they were going to take from there when they returned the rifle, and she was going to distract them. Well, in the meantime, she began kissing her ex, and there was a shot fired in the window, and she's part of it. She's there, and she gets convicted with the other two guys that she was a part of showing up at this scene. And the rest of this story is something that you see on a Netflix series. There is an event that happens in the jail with the person working at the jail. The police officer takes her into a room. There's a rape, and years later, this ends up being something in another case that she's drawn into. It is absolutely amazing and takes your breath away. How are we talking to Sheena Eastburn right now? Because she was life without parole. There was a Supreme Court ruling that came down and changed the way that sentences were for children of under 18. And there was new evidence that was presented in her case, and she was paroled in 2017 after 25 years in prison. She's now a paralegal at a law firm specializing in criminal cases. She's also founded two nonprofits, Show Me Justice for All and Prep for Release, a reentry program. She just does a lot of work. She's also into education and getting her communications degree. She's just busy, and she's somebody that I've paid attention to with LinkedIn and just things that she's doing, and I'm really happy she's made time to be here today to tell this incredible story. And I was just telling her, this goes into 1,100 prisons across the United States, and this is going to be something I think that the people inside are going to be riveted to, because she's made it on the outside after this incredible journey. Before we get into all that, I want to recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots looking for cars? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. Hey, your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Welcome in, Sheena Eastburn. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Sheena and I had a little bit of a hiccup here before we got started, because this big Roadcaster Pro thing that's got all these back switches to it, there was something that wasn't plugged in. I couldn't hear Sheena. And then David came in and saved the day. So here we are. We can hear each other.
Awesome. Finally.
Finally. So, Sheena, I just gave them just a piece of this incredible journey that you've been on for decades. And I think the best place to start with this is to go back to the beginning, because I was kind of fascinated by the point of, like, you were 15 years old getting married. What was going on in your world as a little girl and growing up? What was all that like?
Well, I was born to addict parents.
Okay.
And so my father was in and out of prison. My mother was an addict. Both of them were addicts, and I lived with my grandparents, which were ministers. And in my childhood, tumultuous things happened. Sexual abuse from a family member. First drug rehab by age 12 for drinking and smoking weed in that day. And so my mother did come back to my life and tried to be a mom again after she kind of got herself together. But after sexual abuse and just having that tumultuous type of childhood, I was very angry, upset. I was into drugs and alcohol. And so it was about 2 months before I got married, I met my to-be husband. He was the local drug dealer. He was the guy that everybody knew. And I talked to my mom and they let me get married. I said, either let me get married or I'll run away from home.
And he was like 22, something like that?
He was about to be 21 when this
21.
happened.
Okay.
And I only knew him about 45 days, probably, maybe 50. And then we got married in 45 days or 50 days again. Within the first month was the first hit. Within the second month was the first rape. I was told it wasn't rape because I was his wife, and that's what God commanded me to do as his wife. And back in 1992, 1990, I was 15, no car. There was no cell phones or anything like that. He moved me out into the country. I was very isolated in an abusive situation, mentally, sexually, emotionally, and physically.
Sheena, how did you get out of at that age? How did you even know about how to go about a divorce? I mean, I figure somebody that's 15 years old is kind of like a freshman in high school as far as where that is in your
Yep.
time in line. How were you even, how did you even know how to get out of that marriage?
I didn't know how to get out of that marriage. I tried to run away from home like teenagers do. And he would just find me. He would tell my friends that he would kill them, family members, hunt me down. It was always bad when he found me. He also, I fight against banning child marriage under the age of 18 now, in capital, states all around the world. I go to capitals to tell my story. But the thing is that the laws now are changing. But back then, unless you're 18, you cannot get a divorce because you can't get a contract with a lawyer. Unless you're 18, I couldn't go to a domestic shelter because I had to be 18.
You were too young.
And not until my mother walked out and actually seen him physically beating me, which people seen the black eyes, busted lips, things. And the mindset back then was, don't make him mad, be a better wife, try to avoid those things. But when you get married at that young age, before age 18, you can't enter in any other contract. So until my mom walked out that day, she finally seen that I needed a restraining order. I needed my mother's signature to even get a restraining order.
I was confused on Sheena because I've got 3 daughters. I mean, I guess when you get married at the age of 15, do you need the approval of your parents as adults? Okay.
Yeah, you have to have at least one signature. My father really didn't want me to get married, so he didn't sign. And a lot of people actually use this for trafficking now, severing children's rights with another parent. But back then, yes, it's same as law. I could get married with a signature.
So you end up splitting out of this marriage, and you end up getting with someone that you haven't been with very long. And so that evolves into something that ends up being this huge nightmare that you fall into.
Yeah.
Can you kind of walk us through how, because when I was reading about this, I was thinking, oh my gosh, because a lot of it was that you were kind of brought along into this with these other two guys, and they were going to use you. I mean, I'll let you fill in the blanks, but just what I read, they were going to use you to be a basically decoy to go in, talk to Tim, get him to take you on a motorcycle ride so they could go in and burglarize his place and return. You had told him to return the rifle because it had a serial number on it and it could get everybody in trouble. But it ends up raining. And so you are in this place, and like I said at the beginning, you guys begin to kiss, and then the event happens where he gets shot through the window. Can you take us back a little bit before you ever get there to that place? What were you thinking was happening?
Well, I have to back up a little bit about 3 weeks before.
Please do. Yeah. Tell it how you would tell it.
We did finally get divorced, but he still wouldn't let me go. I mean, the restraining order didn't help. He still followed me, stalked me, used money because I was still barely 17. So he still utilized all these tools to keep me, and he was a drug dealer and I was an addict.
Right.
So about 3 weeks prior to that, Tim kidnapped me. And when he did, he took me to a wooded area. Now, you have to back up a little more further because when I ran away from him before, the cops returned me right back to him because he was my partner. So 3 weeks prior to this, right after the divorce, he kidnaps me. He takes me to a wooded area with a shallow grave, puts a gun in my head, says, I could kill you, and everybody would think you just ran away.
Wow.
So I think that fear, that started the subconscious fear that just started. When I've thought about all these years, like what really kicked that off, I would say that was the pivotal point in my life that everything started to move. So I met these guys. I tell them about my life, the guy, Terry, I tell him about my life and what I've been through. And so Tim would still call, still drop by, always telling me that I'm coming home. I'm going to remarry him whether I want to or not. Nobody can make me stay away from my wife. That stalker crazy stuff. So I'm just trying to go back here. So they robbed his house and they did steal a gun. And I had no knowledge of this because they knew he was a drug dealer. So I think they were looking for more of the drugs. And I was fearful because at one point I had taken all his guns because he had threatened me so much. And I tried to give them away. I tried to get rid of them. And that ended very bad for me. That was one of the worst beatings I probably had. So my fear immediately went to, oh my God, he's going to find out you are my friends. You stole his gun. He's going to kill me. So it started out pretty much that
you were
day.
living in fear basically of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had almost died a couple times. I mean, it's not like I wasn't near death a couple times, being choked out or, those situations. He caused 2 miscarriages beating me. So, I mean, this was a guy who was not a nice guy. So one of the guys and this is probably the story that you don't get, that never gets to the media because media doesn't give it you all, right? They said, I wonder what it'd feel like to kill somebody. It was just that simple statement. We're high, we're drunk. And I said, well, I know somebody. And that's how the conversation started. Now at 17 and they're 18 and 19, you don't really think that's going to happen. It's kids talking, but I still have this fear. So we ended up going down to his house. And like you said, everything was weird. It was strange. I was trying to get him out of the house at the same time. Honestly, I think my subconscious was like, this is my freedom. Terry did shoot him. I did try to save him. There was nothing I could do. It was very traumatic at 17 to watch this happen. Terry pulled me out of the house. Next thing, we're running, and then Tim died. And a couple days later, the police got a hold of us. Well, I told my mother that I was there and I watched what happened because I was freaking out, and she actually called the police on me. And And next thing I know, I'm at the sheriff's office answering questions.
Wow. And again, you're just a teenager and you've gone through all this. What at that time is going through your mind as a teenager who's just gone through all this? I'm sure trauma and the stress and and then you're being, uh, interrogated by police officers. How did you handle that?
I was very high when they questioned me. Like, I don't even remember the interrogation. I think I told so many stories. I was really high. Uh, I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really talked about the abuse when they questioned me.
Mm.
And then when I got arrested, I went to jail. And my lawyer at the time said, we're not going to bring up the abusive motive. And I was like, but this is the reason it all happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never allowed to bring the abuse out. They made it about a robbery, drugs, the gun, and never was I allowed to bring the abuse out. And not until since I've came home, or like right before I got out, was I able to really even start talking about the abuse. Because part of me also, because I was told never talk bad about the victim,
Mm-hmm.
that was embedded in me in jail, because he's not here to defend himself.
Right.
And so and I was angry. I was still angry at 17. I was facing the death penalty. I wasn't old enough to get divorced, sign a contract, but yet I was old enough to be tried as an adult and facing the death penalty at one point. And I didn't understand the justice system. I didn't understand what was happening to me. I didn't understand the victim's father actually stood by me during my whole trial, apologized to me. And he actually was the only reason we didn't get the death penalty, because he took it off the table, and he actually asked them to give me a plea bargain, but they didn't because of what
That would
happened.
be Tim's dad.
Yes.
And if I remember reading, your mom worked for them
Mhm.
through all these years, right?
Through the trial and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing
They
is.
knew what kind of life I lived for almost 2 years with their son.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that part of them, the father anyway, felt somewhat responsible in some of that, because I asked him for help on numerous occasions.
So when you went through getting put into jail, there was all this strange weirdness where the sheriff was talking about you were costing money, and more or less that this is some kind of big hassle for them. But then something happens in the jail when you're the only person who's being jailed in the jail, and this man, I think his name was Zorns, ends up taking you into a supply closet and does something with the tape on and they can tell by the clock on the wall that it's been messed with, so that he could delete the time that you could see going to and from. Sheena, what in the world what was going through your mind in that whole fiasco?
Well, yeah, he came in my cell on more than one occasion. And I finally told my mom, I said, one of the officers, he was a jailer, I was coming in my cell. And she said, for what? And I said, he's raping me. And she flipped out and got a hold of the sheriff. And of course, it became a big deal. Within 24 hours, I was taken to a doctor's office where they gave me a pill. I was asleep. Later on that night, and there is record of this, later that night I woke up and I was in the emergency room from hemorrhaging.
Mm-hmm.
And they told my mother that they had tried to give me an abortion, but I wasn't even pregnant. So this backwood doctor's office. At the same time that trip happened, the officers kept telling me, you wanted this. This is your fault.
Yeah, the sheriff kept saying it was consensual, which I don't know how in the world he would have ever known that. This is a teenager. This is a person who's working at the jail. How in the world could he discern that it was a consensual situation regardless?
Yeah. And
I'm not sure how anything like that could be consensual, being someone that's being jailed, and they have all the authority and the ability to make you do more or less whatever is going on in the jail.
Well, the first time that he came in my cell, he brought some drugs in. And so, of course, being a drug addict, and then he was a jailer. He didn't want to be a jailer. He wanted to be on the road. So what happened was they had video of him coming in my cell, because what happened in my cell and it happened in the property closet. And I gave them all that. I wrote a diary. I kept diary of it. They had underwear with his DNA. They had mattress. They had my clothes. But all of a sudden, all that came up missing. And the prosecutor told the sheriff at the time, make it go away and do not F up my murder case. They knew it could create an issue with the case. So the prosecutor, Joe Schulberg, Tim Perigo, my lawyer, Dwayne Cooper, another lawyer, they all covered it up. They all knew what happened to me. Actually, it was Tim's father who came to the jail and said, she may be here for murder, but she's not your personal whore.
I read that.
And he stood up for me. And so it was probably, they locked me down. They wouldn't let me have phone calls. They wouldn't let me have visits. They shut everything down. And then while I was in prison 17 years later, I got a call from a detective that said, we need your help. We know you were raped. And
all that evidence she was using in that, which, by the way, you helped in that case, but for him, he was convicted for the 14-year-old, but in the deal, they were allowed to drop the charges on what your situation was, which I found flabbergasting that happened.
Well, they asked me if they could charge him with 2 counts of forcible rape and then utilize that to get him to plea bargain to the 14-year-old, so the 14-year-old didn't have to go to court. And as a teenager going through a court system like that,
you felt for her.
I absolutely, if that saved that 14-year-old from having to get on the stand and testify. So he did take 2 counts of forcible rape. He did 4 months in prison. And they dropped it but he's now a registered sex offender. So, because when all that happened, they promoted him and punished me. They gave him that road job he wanted. So he was an officer on the road pulling people over.
It's just, it takes your breath away. The next step in this is that you end up, how long were you in jail before you went to trial?
2 years and 9 months.
2 years and 9 months in jail before you ever went to trial. Can you tell us a little bit about the trial?
That's kind of a blur, but from reading transcripts, because really it was a blur to me. I was on medication, and the jail did give me medication between the trauma of my life, jail, and then the rapes. I pretty much was highly medicated. I remember going through the trial, and they had one guy that testified against us that said we planned it. And that was basically it. And I remember
that guy, he got off because by saying that, he got off on some things on a plea deal.
Charges and some other charges he had pending.
Not uncommon.
No. And during the trial, they were going to call a lot of my family to the stand. And one of them was my grandpa, who to me was everything in my life. And the prosecutor came with, if you get on the stand, we won't question your family. So he knew once he got me on that stand that I probably was. And plus, they had my little public defender who got my case 2 weeks. The new public defender got my case 2 weeks before my trial. They brought in the gladiator from the attorney general's office, the big dogs from Jefferson City, and prosecuted me. So
that guy was later interviewed saying he was way above his head.
Yeah. And so that other lawyer too, he eventually got on the stand and said, I did not defend her because I got her trial 2 weeks beforehand. She did not have my best. And so I always appreciate Frank for doing that. But during the trial, I had 2 jury members. One was on the top 2 jury members said I was guilty till I proved my innocence, and they sat on my jury. So I was already guilty before it even began. I was the top news in McDonald County. Everybody knew the case. It was such a small town that when they did the jury poll, his brother was one of the people on there. And I was like, we might want to strike him. And I mean, his last name was the same. It was his brother, but that's how small a town it was that they were taking a jury poll from. So everybody had already made up their mind that I was guilty. None of the abuse was allowed out. And did I deserve time? Absolutely. But life without parole was kind of, or the death penalty was a little much.
So, Sheena, how does one put their mind around that? Going to
Life without.
trial, being in jail for 2 years, and then being told that you have been convicted of murder and you're going to serve out the rest of your life without parole. Like what
Well,
what happens in your thinking with that?
really, when you're a teenager like that and somebody says life without parole, I was actually sentenced to death by incarceration. Um, your mind cannot comprehend it.
No.
Even when I went to prison, I went to the adult prison, I still in some way thought I still could come home. I
Okay.
couldn't.
So you hadn't lost hope.
No, and most people don't realize that what life without parole really means. I mean, as a teenager, I could not comprehend what that meant. I remember going into prison and somebody said, little girl, you better get in that law library because you're
Mm-hmm.
the only one that's going to be able to fight this.
Mm.
And that's where I spent most of my time, was in that law library, researching, learning, and eventually called Johnny Cochran later on in jail because that's what I did. I learned the law. But still, in all that time, I was very angry. My first 10 years, I was a heathen in prison. I didn't follow the rules, insulting behaviors, organized disobedience, um, just getting in trouble a lot, fighting, things like that.
Well, let's talk about that. And in fact, let's take a break here because I want to talk about that time period of you going in and having to readjust into that new world. Obviously, I can't even identify. I went to Leavenworth for a 5-year sentence, and I know that time period when you get in there, that whole shock of the unknown world. But you'd already been in for 2 years in a jail, so that's a very bad place. So, but I want to get when we get back. I want to talk about how that entry went and who you met up with and how you started surviving in there. Before we do that, I want to recognize a lot of people don't like how they show up online. Many individuals think there's no hope when it comes to managing your reputation online. Well, there is hope. It's called the Discoverability Company, and they can help you, whether you're building a reputation from scratch, repairing your search results after a negative news story, or even if you're just trying to position yourself a little bit better against your competition. Discoverability can also help you how you're portrayed on popular AI services like ChatGPT. To learn more, visit discoverability.co. They're even launching a do-it-yourself SEO option, a course for individuals who want to take on their search results on their own budget and speed. Listeners of Nightmare Success can take $100 off the DIY SEO course with coupon code Nightmare Success. And I want to recognize that Nightmare Success is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group, the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white-collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you this is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you've made it through to the other side, this is a great space for you. You can join us on Zoom Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. So, Sheena, even though you haven't got it wrapped around your, how to deal with this is life without parole, it's basically you're going to be in prison for the rest of your life. You go into a maximum security prison as a teenager. Walk us through that. What was that like? How did you adapt and survive in a world that you had to learn to live in?
Well, of course, first call was to mom. Please get me out of here.
Please.
Please. But strangely enough, when I walked in prison, it was the first time I felt free in my life.
That's interesting. That's deep.
Um,
And why?
Well, no more sexual abuse, no more being beat, no more being raped. Because of course I didn't watch Cell Block H as a child, so I didn't know about all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So, but for the first time, and plus being in county jail 2 years, 9 months, no sun, no outside, I finally could go out on the yard.
Mm-hmm.
I could make friends. I could see my family, call my family, because McDonald County Jail was awful.
Yeah, it's rock bottom.
They were terrible. So I got to play basketball again, volleyball. I got to play softball. So all of a sudden I had this newfound freedom that was that I never knew in my life before because of my childhood, terrible marriage, and then jail. But when I first came in, I heard, "Hey, white girl." I was on my bed crying, holding my Bible, and this I mean, she's like 6'2", big old black lady, and she's like, "It's all right, Steve's here." And I thought, "Oh my God, this is awful. I'm already gonna be somebody's baby,"
Oh,
you know. But it wasn't. She actually took me under her wing and she said, "You have a lot of time." And she's the one that said, "Go law library.
okay.
I'm gonna teach you how to hustle." And I'm not gonna, I have a daughter your age, and I'm not gonna, I think that was my praying grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, God put something in safety over me.
Mm-hmm.
I just got really lucky. And so she taught me how to jail. She was an OG back in 92 when we went to prison. It was a different type of breed of women that when you went, these were like true gangbangers, true, OGs. They were the real OGs that was in prison. And so I got really lucky. And I had a problem with authority, of course, because of the rape. So anytime an officer would try, especially males, I would end up with insulting behaviors or refusing to let them search me or, things like that. Of course, your first fight is always a big deal. I had that. I was tested, and so I had to fight. 10 years later, though, so throughout being angry, upset, all these things, they had a class called Impacted Victims of Crime.
So you're saying you had a really rocky 10 years of getting into that world that you knew you were going to have to survive in. And
Yeah, life without parole. What were they going to do? Take my date?
right. No, I
Yeah.
mean, you had nothing to lose.
No. And so I didn't care about their officers. I didn't care about going to the hole. Bring me my food and milk. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So after it was about 10 years, 2004, so almost 10 years, they had a class, Impacted Victims of Crime, and this is where my life changed.
Okay.
So a victim came in and shared her story about her husband being murdered. But it wasn't that. It was the fact of all the emotions that she went through and all the things she went through. And I wasn't really thinking about Tim as the victim for a long time, but his mother, his father, his
Mm-hmm.
brothers, his sister, my community, my family. For the first time, I was able to see that it wasn't about me.
Mm-hmm.
The choices I made impacted an array of people. And seeing that woman talk to me, that victim changed the trajectory of my life in prison.
Mm.
She sharing her story, her pain. I seen my mother-in-law, what it was like to bury her son.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't, do I wish I would have made different choices? Do I wish he was here and he could have became a different person too? Hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But at that time of my life, I didn't think those things through. At 17, you're not thinking longevity. You're not thinking consequences. Right. You're not thinking of those things. You are just thinking, I don't want to hurt no more. I don't want to be hurt no more.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be free. And I don't want to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was when that year I became an ICVC facilitator myself. And then I just started taking classes, anger management, which I got kicked out the first time for being angry, but I took it.
You got kicked out of anger management for being angry.
I did. I was always known for like organizing things like, so I've always been an advocate for the people inside myself, later on in life. And I found myself in there in abusive relationships too. You know what I'm saying? So I had to learn, to start to take care better of myself, to find the root. And so I did 5 years intensive therapy with the therapist. I took all these classes, became facilitator. If I learned it, I taught it. And Puppies for Parole was a huge change for me because I had became so numb to things that learning to train an animal and live for something breathing and caring and needed me taught me unconditional love again that, well, actually I'd never known. And so
you train the dogs in prison. How long would you have the dogs to train?
Oh, we had them for 6 weeks to up to 2 months, 3 months. But I became a master trainer, so I was the trainer who trained other people to train dogs. Now, you would not know that by my 3 pitties today. I say all the time, I can't believe your dogs act like that, but they're my babies.
All right, I totally understand. My dogs are not trained at all, but I love them to death.
And I just spent time still doing law that we call us jailhouse lawyers. And I finally realized I was going to come to the best version of me, even if that was my life, because I could help somebody else not come back to prison maybe. I could help somebody else get out of abuse and learn that domestic violence only led to worse things, your own murder or somebody else's murder.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started and then of course I gave my life to God. I was real big, about not jailhouse religion and all. I was very against all that stuff. I was very angry with God for a long time. Um, and then I just started doing the things I needed to do for myself. And in 2012, Miller versus Alabama came along. I was sitting on my bed and somebody said, "Did you see the ticker?" And I'm like, "What?" They're like, "They said juveniles can't have life without parole anymore." And I was like,
It
"Oh."
was huge. I've had so many people on the show that affected their life.
Yeah, but still in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, we'll see.
Mhm.
Because throughout appeals, trying to find any loophole I could, any of those things. So, yeah, that came across. And then I had an attorney at that time, Kent Gibson, amazing guy out of Kansas City.
How did you find him?
A guy that was helping me actually retained him at first, and then Kent ended up staying on my case. I think he just felt like he needed to help me, and so he's actually one of the attorneys that I kind of work under now. And he just believed in me. He believed, in my life, and that something else needed to change. And so 2012 came along. So at that same time, which is crazy enough, the ticker time, about a month later, here comes the detective with all the videotapes of the rape. And so the prosecutor at the time says, "We want to help you if you'll help us." And so I was like, "Okay, I mean, you don't have to help me. I'm still, I want this guy to pay for what he did to me." And then I found out that the sheriff had the videotape in his house, all the evidence in his house this whole time. And so at that time, they take me back to court. They give me a plea bargain of life with parole. So this is into 2012, maybe beginning 2013. I was getting ready to sign the paperwork. And the last moment, this guy, John Pierce, rips the paper and says, "Nope, we're not doing it."
Okay.
So now this is after I've agreed to all the rape stuff. I've helped them do all this to get this guy convicted. And this happens in the justice system a lot for a lot of people. They make you promises and then don't. So back to prison I went, still with life without parole. And in 2015, my lawyer calls me and says, "Hey, the prosecutor in McDonald County, a judge, and two of us lawyers have found an agreement for 30 years, second-degree murder, which you should have been charged with the first time."
Wow.
And the reason that happened was the arresting officer, the sheriff at the time that arrested me, not the one that allowed the rape to go. He retired after he arrested me, like a few months later. He was my biggest supporter, Luke Keeling. And he said, "I should have never arrested you for first-degree murder. It should have always been second-degree." And so he was one of my biggest advocates. And so they all agreed 30 years, second-degree murder. And in 2015, went to the parole board. 2017, I came home.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack right there, Sheena. I mean, wow. I can't, one of the things you said early on is you never lost hope and you stayed in the law library. You were connected to all these different people, Johnny Cochran and the attorney out of Kansas City, which I think is a big, we shouldn't just gloss over that, because I truly believe there's two ways to go when really bad things happen. When you enter into a nightmare, you can lose all hope and just roll over and basically become a victim and more or less die but be alive. And the other is to be a survivor and figure things out as hope lets you figure things out, because you have to take action with being a survivor and keep walking through. And I think that's when I read over your whole story, that's what I think is so like gripping, is that you had so many things that you could have just rolled over and been in a corner and just gone away. All the things that happened in the jail and just so many different things. People saying that they were going to do something and they didn't do it, and people in authority that were awful, but you never gave up in that. And so when you finally find out after all this time, I mean, this is 2 decades, and you hear that you're going to be released. What goes through someone's mind on a day like that?
There we go.
Okay.
Sorry. All right. If you froze on me, I don't know what happened.
Maybe it was my internet, but what goes through when you, after 2 decades in time and after all this not giving up, and then they tell you that you're going to get out, what goes through someone's mind on a day like that?
Unbelievable. So, even though, because they ripped it out in 2012, and even though I had this and I got a new face sheet, I had seen the IPO, I still in my heart was like, not until I'm walking out and they close the gate behind me do I believe that they freed me. Because too many times when people are in prison, we get our hopes up and then they get snatched away from us. And that happened many, many times for me. Every time I had an appeal and, okay, we're going to do this and this, I would get those hopes up. And there were times I was hopeless. It's not that I never lost hope.
Sure.
It's that when I got hopeless, it put a fire in me to fight more. So it was surreal. But the day came. They tried to give me a 120-day treatment, told me I could get out a few months early if I took their treatment. And I knew that was about money. We all know, whatever. One, I never had a dirty, even though I did back in the day, maybe, but I never had a dirty urine. They never had me with drugs, any of those things. Rumors of me making hooch back in the day, but for years I hadn't done that. So, I knew it was a paycheck thing. So I was like, screw your 3 months. I'll do the rest of the time. So, I did 25 years to the day. They let me out. And when that gate closed behind me, I remember one of the officers, one of the lieutenants actually said, Eastburn, the only way you'll go home is a pine box. And so sometimes we could request who we wanted to walk us out of prison. And I had requested that lieutenant. And when I turned around, I said, how's that for a pine box, sir? And got in the car. My mom and and my cousin are driving down. There's a stoplight right outside the prison. I thought I had been on out counts. So I said, if I ever stop here and the news is following us, everybody's behind us, I jump out of the car and I start just running around the car. I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. That is the moment that it hit me. That when I was running around that car, I wasn't black boxed, I wasn't shackled, I wasn't cuffed, I didn't have these people around me guarding me.
Yeah.
And life began differently, but now it was a whole new set of problems because I'd been locked up 25 years and reentry, post-incarceration syndrome is true. It's a real thing for us, especially been locked up since teenagers. It's a difficult situation.
How'd you start stepping through it? Because I know reentry is tough all the way around, but for somebody that's been around 25 years, what did you start doing through your getting back into society?
First, I tried to just get to know my family a little bit. I hadn't been around them in 25 years. So when you're in prison with this kind of sentence, you either shut people off for the most part because you can't live in there and out here. It's too hard. So I had cut most of my family off. And when I came home, I remember I was being surrounded all these people are like, I love you. I miss you. And I hadn't talked to these people and some of them I hadn't even met yet. And immediately overwhelmed, felt like my family that was true to me and I loved were my sisters, my aunties, my mom, these people I created in prison as a prison family. I was just overwhelmed. I cried, survivor's guilt. There were people who had mentored me and helped me that were still there and I was free. So it was a lot to really process. Couldn't get a job at Burger King. All the listed jobs they gave me. So I actually had to go all the way to the state of Arkansas. I drove an hour and a half to even get a job. And I had to drive an hour and a half back and forth to work every day. And I just felt like if this is freedom, I don't want it. I mean, honestly, this was, you think about when all I want to do is get home, but people don't think about when you do come home, the insecurities, the survivor's guilt, the imposter syndrome, all these things come along with it. My mom is still trying to treat me like I was 17. Who are you texting? Where are you going? What are you doing? I'm like, stop asking me these things. Like, I'm not in jail no more. So it becomes overwhelming. To the point that I wanted to take my own life. I thought I'm going to drive myself into a semi. I'm not going back to prison. And this is just honest. This is how this post-incarceration syndrome affected me. And it was Jelly Roll, a song from Jelly Roll, and Struggle Jennings that came on. Glitter, not all that glitter is gold. And Struggle Jennings in the line said something like, it's harder to come home than it was to go in. You don't understand that statement unless you've been where I've been. And I pulled my car over on the side of the road. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm not alone. Because until then, everybody always acts like they're happy. People are, oh, you're so blessed you're home. You're so, nobody really takes in
There's
consideration
1,000 things going on in your mind. Yeah.
the change, the process, because my mom took me to Walmart, and somebody bumped into me and I turned around. I was like, what's up? My mom's like, whoa, whoa. And I was like, where I come from, we don't bump into each other like that and not say anything, or, that's targeting me. And so you have to learn to live out here to these new rules.
Yeah.
People are disrespectful. They're ignorant, and you have to remember that, you can't just punch them in the face like you do in prison.
Right. It's not as primitive.
No. So you might go back to jail. And so you just have to learn to live again. So post-incarceration is real. So I met a guy. I did meet a guy. And he did 2 tours in Iraq. And if it wouldn't have been for him, Tyler understood I had PTSD. And he's like, you have PTSD. He had been back for, he was in the Iraq war. So he'd been out of the Army for a while. And he just helped me navigate that. Breathe. This is what we can do. You need to go to counseling. You need to, So I'm always thankful and grateful to him, who I'm marrying this year.
It's awesome.
Advice that, he kept me breathing, really.
So is that how you started stepping into the paralegal and becoming an advocate and creating the nonprofits? You just started getting your confidence and stepping and connecting dots?
Well, I didn't really know what to do. I was running a gym for a while because I was personal trainer, nutritionist the whole time.
Right.
I was running a gym in Arkansas. And so I was sitting there one day and I said, prison did not break me. It is not going to break me. And so I started a Facebook group called Prison Did Not Break Me. And all of a sudden I found out all these other people were going through the same things I was. People I was in jail with, people I've never met. And so at first I started that as a nonprofit. And then one day I went to the Capitol. I was like, because somebody said something about talk to a legislator. So I went to Capitol. It happened to be a day of empathy. Dream.org does this thing nationally called a day of empathy. And that's when you lobby. Well, I walked in and I seen these people had all been incarcerated talking to these legislators, senators. They're like, you should go to our cohort. So they invited me, Dream.org invited me to their justice cohort. And I learned how to organize out here, how to advocate out here.
That's what I love about Dream.org. I had Candia Milton on the show, and he's the policy director for Dream.org, and they do so many good things. And Candia Milton, another guy that completely remade himself after being in politics and going to prison and coming back and being in Washington D.C. now, making real change. But I love what they do with that, Sheena, because they show people, teach people how to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, and they did teach me, and they taught me, how to have the conversations, how to tell my story in the most productive way, how to organize my community. And then I got hired. There's a group, it's called National Leadership Council to End Life Without Parole. There's 14 of us, and we work under Human Rights Watch. And so about that time, I got hired to work 10 hours a month. That's been 4 years ago now. Almost. And we're doing a lot of work as well. And like I said, everybody on there is been incarcerated. They had life without parole. We're all home. I became a member of Incarcerated Children's Advocacy Network, which is Campaign of Fair Sentencing of Youth. And all these people I started learning from them, watching what they were doing. And so I was like, I'm just going to, after Dream.org, like really invested in me and did that. I started advocating at the Capitol. And the next thing I know, Candia has me in Washington, D.C., talking on the federal level as well. But there's Michelle Smith, she is Missouri Justice Coalition, who also runs my shirt today.
I like that.
Missouri Abolish the Death Penalty. and she had me working with her. And she's been in federal and state prison. She came home, and I call her my mama org, my org mama. And so she just has really taken me. We worked on the Marcellus Williams advocacy together, and I just, during that moment, I really learned a lot from her too. But she's just kind of put me under her wing, and so now in Missouri, we're starting to get these organizations going that hadn't been there for years. So.
I love everything about what you just said, Sheena, because you walked us through the rock bottom of getting out. You were going to take your life. A song from Jelly Roll wakes you up, and again, like you said, when you hit these moments of despair, you fight your way out of it. And now what you're doing, I mean, I was following you, and that's inspiring for people who are in this whole reentry community, regardless of where they fall into that layering of reentry in the community. Everybody has their own feel and story of how they feel when they get out. Because what I have found is that regardless of when you get out, you carry a lifetime sentence with you as a felon, ex-felon, and you have to learn to live with it. You just put basically an extra weight around your neck, and you walk with it. And like you said, you have to learn to tell your story the way that you need to be able to tell it. You need to find where your experiences can fit in to help make a difference, because we can make a difference, and you're doing that in such a positive way too. I mean, you're using all the different pieces from the youth, all your different things that that you're helping people. And I love that you're doing the paralegal stuff on the criminal defense stuff, because you know this stuff. You've lived it. You were in the law library. If you look back on everything, because I mean, like I said, it's a Netflix movie series. It has to be a series. It can't be a movie. It's too many pieces to it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to put.
It needs to be like 10 episodes at least. Yeah. What do you think is your biggest takeaway through everything that you've experienced?
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big question. My biggest takeaway, that we shouldn't be defined by our biggest mistake. And that, at being a criminal paralegal, I fight for the guilty and the innocent. I believe that people are redeemable. I believe that people, if you give them an opportunity to change, you give them the opportunity to be the best version of themselves, that it's possible. And I think that us as a society throw people away too easily. People don't wake up and think, I'm going to kill somebody today. I mean, or when they're a little boy, think I'm going to end up in prison, or a little girl for the rest of my life. Those are not things that people think about. Mitigating circumstances usually lead to something, unless you're a psychopath serial killer. There's a difference. But people too often, I think, throw people away. Our prison system, our justice system. So my biggest takeaway is we are all redeemable. If given the opportunity, most of the time, your people for your worst crimes, like the murder, like mine, it's a one-time thing. They're not ever going to really, like I said, unless they're a serial, whatever. Most times, even your officers in prison will rather have somebody who killed somebody as their neighbor than they would the guy that's doing meth and in and out of prison 6 times. So my biggest takeaway is redeemable, and we can change the trajectory of our life.
And you did.
If you're in prison right now, you don't have to be part of the gang. You don't have to be part of the drug life. You don't have to do those things. If you want different, be different where you are. And you could be the next leader, leading other people into that positive situation. So, and fight for your case. Fight like hell. Nobody will fight for you. Learn the law, and help people help you.
Yeah, I love it. And everything you just said, you've lived it. And that's what I love about your story, Sheena, is you 10 years in decided, hey, I don't care if I'm here for the rest of my life. I'm going to be a better version of myself. and you did, and then you took the hard knocks of getting out and have figured out your path, and have connected with all these different people who have mentored you, and now you're mentoring people, and it's a good story. It's a good story. I've been really looking forward to this interview because I think it reaches a lot of people on a lot of different levels. And it's,
I want to quit every day, Brent. I want to
yeah,
quit every day. Criminal justice, it's a hard job.
it's hard.
Hard. I want to quit every other day, but I get a phone call from a prison, whether it's Texas,
Yeah.
Mississippi, Missouri, and I hear, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
And so you hear those stories and you're like, I can't quit. I can't quit. And so,
and it feels good, doesn't it? I get a lot of phone calls from people either going into prison or coming out of prison because of the show. And it feels good to be able to share something that might help somebody or connect them to somebody else that might be able to help them. And I think, we can't fix the whole system, but we can fix what we know pieces at a time. And that at least feels better. And what you're doing, Sheena, I just, if we could duplicate you and clone you all over, it'd be fantastic.
Thank you.
Speaking of gratitude and feeling good about things, I want to thank Homestead Financial Home Mortgage here that lets me use this fancy equipment podcast room. If you have a home mortgage need, get a hold of Greg Afdiev. He knows it all. He knows it all. If you're looking for a book out there, I've got one. It's Nightmare Success, Loyalty, Betrayal. There it is. Right here. Check it out. Go get that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. If you're looking for anything that I'm doing, go to brentcassity.com. I spell it wrong. I spell it with a T-Y, not a D-Y. As I used to say to my people when I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Sheena Eastburn, keep doing what you're doing. Don't quit doing it. Everybody needs you out there.
Thank you.
Nightmare Success, in and out.